And welcome, family, to another wonderful edutainment edition of the Artivist Presents A.L.L.B.E. News and Radio. I'm your host for the empowerment segment, R2C2H2, the Artivist, also known as Brother Ron. And family, got a great one for you today. We normally have great ones for you every Sunday, but this is going to be a special one because we're dealing with the Angola 3, Angola 3 update, and the house, and Herman house replacing the jailhouse. That's our show for today. And before we get into that, I just want to read about who is his brother named Herman Wallace, who we just lost. It's on record as being probably serving the longest in solitary confinement in U.S. history. Him and his brother in arms, brother Albert Wilfox, who's still with us. We lost Herman Wallace on October 4th, 2013. Just having 3 days of freedom after serving 41 years in solitary confinement. And I just want to read a little bit the New York Times article. There was an obituary written about his death. It says, Herman Wallace, freed after 41 years in solitary, dies in 71. Herman Wallace's world for much of the last 41 years had been a solitary prison cell by 9 feet when he left a Louisiana prison on Tuesday, freed by a federal judge who ruled that his original indictment in the killing of a prison guard had been unconstitutional. On Friday morning, Mr. Wallace died of cancer in New Orleans. He was 71. He had been one of the Angola 3 convicts whose solitary confinement at the Louisiana State Penitentiary in Angola, an 18,000-acre prison farm on the site of a former plantation, became a rallying point for advocates fighting abusive prison conditions around the world. Mr. Wallace was serving a prison sentence for armed robbery when the correctional officer, Brent Miller, was stabbed to death in a riot in Angola in April 1972. Mr. Wallace and 2 other men were indicted in the killing. 2 of the 3, Albert Wilfox and Mr. Wallace, were convicted in January 1974. They were placed in solitary confinement, joining another prisoner there, Robert King, who had been convicted of a different crime. And for decades to follow, they were locked up for as much as 23 hours a day. Amnesty International published a report on them in 2011, and they were the subject of a documentary film, In the Land of the Free, directed by Vadim John. In the film, Teenie Verrett, the widow of Brent Miller, said of the killing, if they did not do this, and I believe they didn't, they have been living a nightmare. George Kendall, who was a lawyer for Mr. Wallace and who confirmed the death, said in an interview that his client's original conviction was a travesty based on shoddy evidence and that men have been kept in solitary confinement because they have been members of the Black Panthers, the Black nationalist group. Officials worried that they will organize the prison, he said. Even from solitary, Mr. Wallace worked to improve prison conditions and to press his own appeals, Mr. Kendall said. He answered mail from people who had heard about his case. It was a determination he would not be broken by the loneliness of the cell, Mr. Kendall said. Mr. Wallace gained further attention for a project he embarked on with Jackie Sumell, an artist who had struck up a correspondence with him and asked him to describe his dream house. She then rendered his imaginings into a scale model of the house, which became an art installation seen in galleries in a dozen countries. The project, Mr. Wallace had said, helps me to maintain what little sanity I have left, to maintain my humanity and dignity. A documentary film about the project, Herman's House, was shown on PBS in July. Herman Wallace was born on October 13, 1941 in New Orleans, the 4th of 8 children. His mother, Edna Clark Williams, worked in the Orleans Parish Prison. She died in 1996. He is survived by his longtime partner, Maria Hines, and 5 sisters, Victory Wallace, Lorraine Anderson, Barbara Marshall, Justina Williams, and Darlene Williams. Mr. King was released from prison in 2001. Mr. Wilfox is still in prison in Louisiana. Mr. Wallace's cancer was detected in June, his lawyers said. On Tuesday, Chief Judge Brian A. Jackson of the United States District Court for the Middle District of Louisiana ordered that Mr. Wallace be released from prison and said he could be retried. The original indictment, he wrote, was fatally flawed because women had been excluded from the proceedings in which the grand jury was picked. Judge Jackson threatened to hold prison officials in contempt if they failed to release Mr. Wallace immediately. He has spent more than 40 years in prison under a conviction and sentence based on an unconstitutional indictment, the judge wrote. By any measure, the time remaining on Mr. Wallace's life sentence is far less than he has already spent in prison. On Tuesday, Mr. Wallace was released from the Elaine Hunt Correctional Center in St. Gabriel, Louisiana. He was moved by ambulance to the home of a friend and supporter, Ashley Winterstrom, a program director at the Tulane University School of Medicine. Though Mr. Wallace was weak, drifting in and out of consciousness, Mrs. Sumell said he was very well aware of the fact that he was in Ashley's home and he was a free man. On Thursday, Mr. Wallace was indicted again. Samuel C. D'Aquila, the district attorney for East and West Feliciana Parish, said in an interview that he believed that the evidence originally used to convict Mr. Wallace remained sufficient to convict him again. We just felt that he was a murderer, Mr. D'Aquila, I'm probably murdering his name, said, adding, I know he was old. I know he had medical problems. But when he committed a murder, he didn't have medical problems. Brent Miller, the murder prison guard, he said, didn't get another chance. As Mr. Wallace lay dying, his friends at the Winterstrom house did not speak of the indictment as they held a bedside vigil. One of the final things that Herman said to us, his lawyer said in a statement, was, I am free. I am free. So that's the obituary of the New York Times. So his life story was important enough to gain the attention of the New York Times. And we're going to move to the next segment. We've got a special guest with us today. We're very blessed to have her on the show.
This is A.L.L.B.E. News and Radio.
Ron Hurd. Get up out of bed. Let's go. Let's go. Ron Hurd. That's the word. Get out of bed. Give me a jingle. My number 051. Get out of bed. Let's go. Don't be afraid. This is Herb Smith calling you. Herb Smith. All right, I know you're famous and all that kind of stuff, but let's go. Get out of bed.
And welcome back, family, to another wonderful entertainment edition of the Artivist Present. A.L.L.B.E. Radio. I'm your host for the Empowerment segment, once again, R2C2H to the Artivist, also known as Brother Ron. And feel free to join us for this conversation. I see the switchboard is already lighting up with people eager to get in on this conversation to offer their own food or thought and all that good stuff. Please feel free to call in. Area code 646-652-4593. That's area code 646-652-4593. If you're scared to get on the air, we're going to open up the chat room at this moment, and you'll post your comments and questions in the chat room, and it might be read during the show to our guests. So I'm very honored and blessed to have on a phenomenal woman who is, in the words of Duke Ellington, is truly beyond category. She is the co-architect and founder of Herman's House. She's been profiled in a lot of high-profile magazines and media outlets as well. She was a part of this wonderful documentary, also entitled Herman's House. I give you the one and only Sister Jackie Sumell. Welcome to A.L.L.B.E.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
No, you're so humble. You sound so humble and sweet, but you're just a fierce warrior. And I just want to talk about, how do you get yourself involved in all this?
Well, first I want to say that fierceness and being a warrior is not mutually exclusive from being sweet and being motivated by love.
Yeah.
So, and I think that's part of how I got involved with the campaign to end long-term solitary confinement, and with, in particular, Herman Wallace, Albert Wood Fox, and Robert King, the Angola three. I mean, on a very literal level, I met Robert King shortly after he was released, and it was a profound experience that changed the shape and the scope of my life for the next 12 years, until this present moment. And it was just as simple as meeting somebody whose energy, whose aura, whose presence was, like I said, so profound, but also so calm. And he had just spent 29 years in solitary confinement for a crime he didn't commit in the state of Louisiana. And I realized at that moment that I had something to learn from him. So I've dedicated the last 12 years of my life to breathing life and making more visible the campaign to free the Angola 3.
Now, did you imagine yourself, do you come from a long line of activists in your family? I mean, do you know anybody in your family that did this type of work, activism?
Not in my, genetics family, but, you know, obviously the more involved and committed I became to this work, the more I changed the shape and definition of the word family. But my parents were both pretty conservative, you know, voted for Reagan, were pretty disappointed once Clinton got elected, and then changed shape and have, I think, in their own middle-class right, progressive views and views of tolerance, but none of them, I wouldn't consider them overt activists, or they didn't employ any language of activism or radicalism when I was growing up.
So you from New York City, right?
I'm from New York, yeah, that's correct.
All right, cool. Brooklyn by way of Long Island?
Right. So I was born in Brooklyn, and then once my brother came along, my parents bought a house out in Long Island. We moved out to Long Island.
But you went to school out to the West Coast, right? The left coast?
I went to college, grad school in the left coast, yeah. I somehow found myself in undergrad in the Deep South, which was also quite a struggle and a shift for me, and sort of redefining who I was and what was valuable in the world. It was my first experience being introduced to the Deep South. I went to the College of Charleston in South Carolina.
Wow, okay. I just been to Charleston to meet my great uncle for the first time on his 87th birthday. It's an interesting place, very historic, very beautiful architecture. There's a lot of history there. So how did it?
A lot of history, and
how did it influence you? Yeah.
History.
Well, how did it influence you? How did it influence you as an artist, as an individual, going to a place like Charleston, coming from New York?
I mean, I went there to play soccer, right? So I was like a meta athlete, and it was Division I soccer, and I was really naive. I was 18, and I had no idea that, you know, that level of racism, that level of classism, and those divisions existed until I went to the Deep South and got called a nigger for the first time, and just was like, whoa, 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 this is like the reality of people's lives, you know. And someone accused me of, or kicked me out of a party the first semester I was there for being a Yankee and perpetuating the war of Northern aggression. And I was like, what is the war of Northern aggression? You know, that's not my history book, you know. And so it was really confounding because my whole perspective on the world shifted from what I knew growing up on Long Island, which I would never say was a progressive upbringing, but it was, relative. It was definitely progressive.
You know, it's interesting you said when you went to South Carolina, somebody called you a nigger. And I really thought you was black. I really did. I was kind of confused. I mean, what is she? I mean, who is she? Like, what is your identity? Because you was black to me, like a sister to me. And go ahead.
No, I mean, if you're asking me my ethnicity, I'm mixed race. And so my grandfather was from Singapore. My grandma was from Italy, and that's my mom's side. It's much simpler. My dad's side my last name is Finnish. There's some lineage to France and then African American. So,
wow.
But we never identified as a family of color, and my father's family actually was very, very racist, and so they denied any sort of, I mean, they were just like, no, we're white Protestant, blue-collar workers, and my grandmother was, on that side, was one of the biggest haters that I had ever met, They grew up in Garrettson Beach, and there's no black people in Garrettson Beach, And so this is a new discovery. So that we did a DNA test on my dad about 2 years ago, and it turns out that he's about 17% African American.
Oh, okay. Well, you know, once you go black, you never go back. So I was right.
One drop.
That's how powerful black blood is. But you know, what I'm getting at, the reason why I'm asking these questions, I know people say, "What about the Angola 3?" But I'm just curious, like, what type of person would it take for you to do the work that you've been doing for the last 12 years? What is a person's background that comes like to do the work that you're doing, to be so committed to social justice, to eradicating political prisoner and solitary confinement? And, like, you know, it makes sense. It's making sense to me. Cause I also want to ask you, how did going out to school, graduate school, because you went to Stanford, correct?
Yeah.
How did the West Coast influence your activism, your art?
This is the first time that I found myself surrounded in large groups of folks who could have really radical conversations about political shifts and engage the conversations in a global context. It was the first time I had met people who, I think yesterday was the 14-year anniversary in Seattle. So the first time I met people who had participated in direct action, and, you know, they were all sort of like living in or around San Francisco. So it was really important, you know, but I do have like a general criticism of San Francisco, as I think it's a really homogenous population where, you know, people are identifying as progressive or liberal, and of course, you know, they have marriage equality, and they recycle everything, and there's organic fruits, and there's no plastic bags and stuff like that. But in the same, you know, in the same breath, there's very little diversity in terms of African Americans in San Francisco, and that is because they maintain a progressive upper middle class bubble. And I have a big critique of that. You know, it's like people they have the thoughts, they have the vocabulary, they have the ability to, you know, literally, like, you know, engage in really intense arguments about how the world should be and what's missing. But then when push comes to shove, they are the ones just signing petitions, you know. And I'm like, if you're going to call yourselves activists, you have to act. You know, this is the first three letters of the word. You can't ignore it.
You are definitely an activist. You're very active. It's like the South. You really like. Do you feel like the South is your homeland? I mean, like you say, you went to undergrad in Charleston, and now you're in New Orleans, of all places. How did you end up in New Orleans?
I mean, I think I'm in the belly of the beast, and I was with Herman Wallace as my political father. I think I learned very soon into that relationship that you have to go towards what scares you, and you have to keep your enemies close. And so even though this is by far one of the more difficult cities to live in, I also find it one of the most beautiful and complicated. And so in terms of like defining who I am and defining, you know, my own personal criticism of folks who are living in San Francisco, I have tons of friends there. This is not a personal attack. I do think it's just really safe. And to live in the city that incarcerates more people than any place in the world, is one of the most violent cities in the most violent country. You know, I am like committed to actually doing the work, not just talking about it. And so it's important for me to be here.
So you actually was involved in post-Katrina cleanup as well, too? Were you involved in that? And how was that experience for you?
Yeah, I think that's where I recognize the value of action, you know, and that's where there was a huge shift for me in terms of my personal constitution, and I recognize that I really embodied, you know, the ideas that Herman had shared with me, that I need to move towards what scares me and towards what needs to change. And so, yeah, that was revolutionary. Even the Dalai Lama says that you can't just pray. Praying is very important, but you have to act.
Yeah. And you're just a person with action. It's like you're on the move. Like you keep moving. Movement is life, as they say. I want to ask you this. What percentage of the prison population in America do you feel are political prisoners?
I actually wouldn't have an answer to that. I think that the important way to contextualize political prisoners is that there's at least one, right? Because the United States denies that, based on our Constitution, that it's possible to have a political prisoner. So the government will say there's no political prisoners, and so long as we have one that we can identify, we know that the government is wrong. I think there's thousands, of course, but the idea that they've even denied the sort of legacy of political prisoner or the title, right? They've even denied that. I think is significant in what it actually means to be a political prisoner in the United States in the 21st century.
Dealing with Herman Wallace case in the Angola 3, what was the most important thing you learned about dealing with the system, the prison industry complex in particular?
I mean, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but I think one of the most important things I learned was that it's important to be in the belly of the beast, that it's important to move towards what terrifies you, and it's important to never give up, right? It's important to recognize that miracles happen every single day, and sometimes those miracles are not in our favor, right? I almost cursed. It's a miracle that someone has been kept in solitary confinement for 41 years. That's a miracle. It's not a miracle that works in anybody's favor, especially the person who's forced to endure the unimaginable. And I think that recognizing that there's miracles that happen every single day up until the moment that Herman Wallace was unexpectedly released 3 days before he died is an important and an incredible lesson, that you just don't give up, because those miracles will continue to happen if you believe, if you keep your eyes open.
And I know I had a chance to see Herman's house. I thought it was very well done. It really made everything very human and it showed what was going on in a very compassionate light. I want to ask you, what was your most cherished memory of your time with Herman?
Someone else recently asked me this, and I've been visiting Herman for 12 years, and like I said, he's in a lot of ways assumed the role of father to me, and more than just a political father. And he was a huge influence on my life, my actions, which are radical and unexpected. But I think the greatest thing that Herman and I shared was our laughter. And we were constantly teasing each other and constantly playing. And that, by example, his ability to have the capacity for laughter, have the capacity for play, was by example how I want to live my life, to be able to find laughter in the midst of the impossible, to be able to play, to be able to share, to be able to lift others up, even when everything that surrounds me is dark.
It's interesting. I'm listening to you talk. I mean, I'm very visual. I'm a visual artist myself, and I'm listening to you talk. I'm thinking about that other famous New Yorker, Teddy Roosevelt, The Strenuous Life. And it's like you like to live the strenuous life. Like you really want to take the road that's not even created. You create your own road as you go along. And I want to ask you, how has sports prepared you for this life journey that you are currently on? I know you was also a football player when you was in high school, I believe. And sports plays a big part. It plays a big part in your life now, it seems. How has that, your life in sports prepared you for what you're doing as far as your activism?
I mean, I feel like in a lot of ways sports disciplined me to not be totally wild, to always have a consistent moment, a consistent action in my life, and something that it taught me how to be dedicated. I was completely dedicated to being a soccer player for, 18 years or something. Mm-hmm. And football is a multi-layered experience, because I was the first female to play football in the 80s in New York, and there was, there was a whole slew of backlash and criticisms, and my poor brothers were really teased about their sister, who was it was a radical action, and I was like, F it, I want to play football. I don't care. I don't really care if it's only for boys. I love this game, and I'm going to play it, and I did it. And that gave me the wings to believe that I could also do the impossible and build a house for a man who's been in solitary confinement for 40 years,
Wow. And what position did you play in football?
I was a safety.
Oh, well, safety, really? Wow. You like running light out there.
Yeah.
So I was there, I thought you'd be a place kicker or something. You said you play, you be like the challenge.
Safety and switch to cornerback from time to time.
Oh, wow, that's incredible. That's impressive. Maybe I don't know what to say after that. What's the thing that most people don't know about you? What's one thing that most people don't know about you?
I have a lot of intimacy issues. I am like really. I don't get in a lot of relationships, intimate relationships, but I have a lot of relationships that are lifetime relationships, are totally meaningful, and are, as I said, redefine the notions of family. But I don't spend a lot of time in intimate relationships.
I mean, I got this from the documentary, but I'm just curious. It said, like, during the time you was helping Herman, you lost your mom to cancer. It's like, you had a terrible relationship with your biological father. How has this issue of loss helped you deal with things? I mean, how has loss helped you to deal with life?
I think that I also lost my first love in a car accident, and I think that I've been taught in a really clear way by the universe that loss is as much a part of life as gain, as the potential for gain. And like I said, this idea of miracle is not limited to just what's beautiful. Like the miracle that my first love was driving on an icy road late at night and lost control of his car and died really young. Like, it's a miracle, and it's not a miracle that I would ever ask for or wish on anyone else. Nonetheless, it's a miracle. And so I think that I've really learned through the process of loss that it's equally as important as the process of gain, if not more. And that, my biggest lessons and biggest opportunities have thus come from, those moments that I think are impossible. Like losing my mother, which at the time I thought I'd never recover from, or losing Herman, or losing Aaron, or almost losing my house, or whatever. Sometimes being in traffic feels just as impossible.
Oh, wow. I mean, you live so many lifetimes in one life, it seems like. Somebody always say a setback is a setup for a comeback, but sometimes it's hard to get up sometimes and be knocked down so many times. But it's like you're so resilient. And where do you think that resilient spirit come from that you have?
Oh, I don't know the answer to that. I mean, my mom was a fighter and survived a really abusive relationship with her father and my father. And I think that she was always laughing, and that was a really good example for me. I also think there's just some DNA stuff happening, and there's some spiritual stuff happening, and I believe that life is incredible. I just had this really wonderful conversation last night, and I don't know if I'm taking up too much time.
No, you go ahead.
I went and had some tea with a friend who just got back from Syria, and he was doing this. He's a doctor, Doctors Without Borders, and so he said to me, he was telling me, he's like, I don't know if I completely disassociate from what's happening when I'm there, and I just don't allow it to become part of my psyche, and then when I come home, I'm confronted by all of it, and he's like, Jackie, how do you do it? Like, how do you continue to go inside the prison industrial complex? How do you continue to endure the losses, right? The defeats, the moments where, the appeals win and Albert Woodfox remains incarcerated. How do you do with that and still maintain your joy? And I was like, well, I don't ignore. I don't ignore it when it happens. And I recognize that I have a responsibility, that I've been given a really incredible view of the world, a really incredible perspective, and it's my responsibility not to give up on it. And that my job in every situation is not to expect that everything's going to go my way. My job is to try and see the beauty in the horror, to try and see the the love in the moments that seem devoid of it or totally depleted. And when you're in the heart of it, when you're visiting someone you love who's dying and he's still in fucking solitary confinement, it gets tough, you know, it gets tough, and you have to be creative, and you have to make sure that everybody knows that your purpose is to expose that there's still beauty and there's still hope. Yeah.
Oh, wow, that's a powerful statement. And also, I don't want to forget to add, you was a beauty queen as well when you were a teenager, right?
I was pageant. Never a beauty queen.
Okay,
so right. Obnoxious, yeah. Never. Never. That was like a one-time thing that my mom was really into doing, and it was such a joke. And then my brother, so the filmmaker had asked my brother if he could dig up some video footage of me playing football, and somehow he couldn't find it, but he found that. So he sent it to the filmmaker, and I never authorized that it be used. You know, I actually find that really embarrassing and misleading, because I never participated in another beauty pageant or photo shoot or anything else, you know. I'm pretty shy, you know.
I would never know that. Right? I would never know you were that shy. I mean, like, I'm looking at the work you're doing. I mean, you're such a, you know, a person that's an advocate. You're a true vocal person with your words and action. I never thought you were a shy person. Yeah,
and I also have a very public persona because I recognize my responsibility. But, you know, I'm not promoting Jackie when I'm on Democracy Now!, and I'm not promoting Jackie when I'm talking to you, and I'm not promoting Jackie when I'm in front of the camera. I'm promoting something much bigger than myself, which is a really different experience than some teenage beauty pageant.
Well, or the things you are promoting, I want to ask, what's the situation with Herman's house? Where does it stand, the project? Like, what's going on with that?
Yeah, we're in a really exciting space right now where there's an opportunity to get some land from the city of New Orleans. And so we're filling out the application. It's for that. It's a bit of a complicated application, and so we're not unsure. And until we actually are approved, we don't want to get people's hopes up, because not everybody can handle disappointment. But so that is the most exciting thing that's happening. We're also asking people to really focus on parallel campaigns like Solitary Watch, for their Solidarity Hunger Strikers is another great one, and then NARCAT, National Religious Campaign to End Torture, Against Torture. And then, of course, in January, Albert Woodfox has a really important trial date, so his case will be in front of the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals here in Louisiana.
How aware are the people on the ground? So, I know you're into grassroots organizing. How aware are the people about this Angola 3 in New Orleans?
My argument would be that they're not aware enough, that we have a long way to go, and it's incredibly frustrating to live in a city where every single person is not completely engaged into ending mass incarceration and the prolonged use of solitary confinement. When you are in a city that incarcerates more people than any place in the world, you would hope that there would be more engagement, but we're up against a huge monster in terms of garnishing people's attention, and it's the entertainment complex, right? There's just so many things that are entertaining and are exciting and are much easier to think about. And the unfortunate, but yet potentially most powerful catalyst to getting more folks engaged is that more folks are being incarcerated. So little by little, everybody is becoming 3, 2, 1 degrees of separation from someone who is wrongfully or unjustly or overly incarcerated.
I know I was reading on your website. I thought it was very profound. When you think about it, you were talking about the 13th Amendment. It never abolished slavery. Slavery is still active. And you think about, I remember I read the book Slavery by Another Name. You look at the privatization of punishment. And I'm thinking to myself as you're talking, how the hell are you going to really stop this monster? I mean, how can you stop them? His main objective is not to rehabilitate, but to make money. And I'm in Memphis, and I saw on the news recently in Senatobia, Mississippi, where they got a law outlawing sagging pants. They'll fine you. You know, I guess the first fine will be $50. But, like, you know, I remember hearing Attorney General Holder talking about repealing the drug laws and stuff, the mandatory sentence and stuff like that. But whatever they take away, they give you something in return. They'll take away something and put something in its place. So how can you deal with that? I mean, you know, you're dealing with logic. My thing is, you know, you're dealing with the Angola 3 and what you're doing, you're talking logic where the system is irrational when it comes to logic. It's not about logic with it. How can you deal with these people and not just get, like, overly, like, to hell with it?
Well,
to hell with all the damn petitions. Stop the damn petitions. You talking about the petitions. I'm tired of signing petitions.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a big fan of them either. But, you know, in terms of, like, how do I sustain and maintain, I mean, it's the reality is that 2 out of the 3 members of the Angola 3 have been released from prison, have had their convictions overturned, right? And that's a huge victory. I encourage anyone who's getting involved and engaged against the beast to not hold on to the victories as if they define success, right? Because there's so many losses along the way, and you have to, once again, recognize that even amongst those losses, there's the opportunity to gain strength and to gain momentum. I do think that it's going to be a collective power that shifts momentum ultimately, you know, and I think one of the most beautiful things that Robert King talks about is that the notion that slavery was legal even though it was immoral, you know, for centuries. And it was the momentum of the people who said this is immoral and therefore should be illegal that changed the laws, right? So I think that it's the same thing with the use of long-term solitary confinement. It's legal, but it's immoral, and we have to get a critical mass engaged and involved in order to shift the perspective.
Well, it was the
moral perspective.
Yeah, but the interest is, like, you know, like Dr. King talked about before he died, like we integrated into a burning house. Like we lost our moral compass. We lost our way. I mean, we all about war, and you know, you look at, like, you talking about distraction with the entertainment, the drugs. You know, we the biggest drug market on the planet. You know what I'm saying? We love distractions. We like to go to the movies. We like to look at reality TV. We like to all tune out, you know, look at Sunday football, whatever. And people are so afraid. Like, you're trying to fight this aggression, this war of aggression, whatever. And a lot of folks are even afraid to admit that they exist. You know, they'll believe in Santa Claus. They believe in the Tooth Fairy, but not the big, mean, nasty prison and industry complex. No way. Like, everybody go to jail supposed to be there.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I thought the same thing 12 years ago, you know, and then I met Robert King, and I was like, oh, wait, there's, you know, innocent people in prison. And, you know, there's a lot, the conversation is growing. I'm really grateful to folks like Michelle Alexander and Angela Davis, who's been doing it forever, you know, but sustainably. Michelle's book, New Jim Crow and the Age of Colorblindness and Mass Incarceration, is just like a paradigm shift for a lot of folks. And people are reading it, and they're learning these ideas for the first time from someone who is, A, a Stanford grad, B, a Soros fellow, C, good-looking, well-respected, married to a Republican, right? And it's believable. It's not coming from the radicals who initially gave her the message, right? It's not coming from the black bloc. It's not coming from the formerly incarcerated. It's coming from someone who can deliver the message. And I think that is really important in terms of what Americans in particular are comfortable with, you know? It's like once Brad Pitt says it's wrong, then people are like, oh, yeah, that's really effed up, you know? Or once Brad Pitt says it's right, you can go ahead and adopt babies from anywhere, you know? Then people are like, oh, then we could adopt babies from anywhere, you know? So I think the messenger is really important.
Well, you know, the thing about it is you could have easily been Michelle Alexander. You're good looking. You're a Stanford graduate. You got all the credentials. You came from a Republican background. I mean, you just chose a different way. And I think you chose because Michelle Alexander, the people in the hood ain't reading that. You know what I'm saying? Because they experience it every day. People up in New York City don't have to worry about reading her book because they experience stop and frisk every day if you're a black or brown person, especially a male. Mm-hmm. You don't have to read about this, but what she's doing, she's educating the folks who don't. It's like Uncle Tom's Cabin. Jim Crow's like Uncle Tom's Cabin. I didn't read it because I'm a black man in America. I don't have to read a book to know what's going on. I got people in jail. But, like, how much you feel that what's happening or what happened to the Angola 3 is because they were Black Panthers, because they're political leanings?
How much do I think?
Yeah, how much do you think you got to do with them being punished?
I think 100%. I think the warden also has said that, that he won't let them or would not let them out of solitary confinement because they would spread their Black Pantherism. Right? So I think it's not something that anyone in Louisiana has masked, because they're too ignorant to recognize that that's illegal.
Right.
And they're good old boys, So I think that there's no doubt that they have been punished for their political beliefs.
Let me ask you this, too. You speak to Brad Pitt, and I know he does a lot of work in New Orleans with the housing and whatnot. Has he or anybody from his party, or have y'all tried to connect with Brad Pitt and his people on the Herman's house?
Hey, I'm sorry. Could you just repeat that question?
You try to connect with Brad Pitt. I know he does a lot of work in New Orleans with the housing and situation down there. Have you ever thought about connecting with him? I know you thought about it, perhaps, but has that,
Yeah, I actually have thought about it, and early on when Make It Right was just a fledgling project, we did have the opportunity to connect, and it was my understanding that he was too afraid of the prison issue.
Brad Pitt? Mr. Brad Pitt? Okay.
This is Brad Pitt, and, I get that, right? The idea that he was trying to do something huge, which was had not been done yet in the city of New Orleans, and he was trying to, and if he sort of associated his name with someone who was not yet proven to be innocent, where there was questionable doubt of his innocence, and I think it was too great of a risk for him. I think now things are different, and maybe at some point I could reopen that conversation, but I get it. I get it.
Wow. I want to get this line. I know people are waiting to talk to you on the line, so I hope it's I'm going to get to caller 228. You're on the air. Welcome to We All Be. 228, you on the air? You want anything for our guests? Any questions or comments?
Yes. How you doing?
Hey, how you doing? Welcome to We All Be. What's your name, ma'am?
My name is Dorothy Dunning. From
Hey, Ms. Dunning, how you doing?
All right. How you doing? And I was calling in the talk on the show today, and I don't really know too much about the case that you was talking about, but I did see it on the news where they released the gentleman and he passed away. But
yes,
I'm the grandmother who have been fighting for her grandchildren, and I'm trying to get exposure because truly I have been oppressed. I'm from Goshen, Mississippi, but both states ruled in my favor for me to adopt my grandchildren. The state of Minnesota back and the state of Mississippi back me to get my grandchildren. But the judge overruled and gave my grandchildren to a white family. And I don't mean to say it like that, but it's true. And my grandchildren was placed in a home where the foster mom had 4 children of her own and had 5 more foster children. And I learned that the reason they tried to cause the children special needs is because I found out they get over $3,000 and something per child. And I told them that I didn't want one dime for my granddaughters. But I want to ask a question, and my question is, I don't know if a lawyer on the line or not. The lawyer that represented them, he's over the adoption board in the state of Minnesota, and he's over the garden of Lightem board. And to me, that's conflict of interest. How can that be, him being a lawyer and working for the state and fighting parents and relatives from getting their own children. I just never seen anything like this. I didn't even know this exists, but I have found out this is a major money-making business. And they deliberately holding the children where they can't go back home in order to make money. I also recently found out the states get so many billions and thousands of dollars for housing foster children. For each child that's placed in foster care, that state receives so much money. And that's what Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was saying, like, this. Once they put the money in the equation, it's like the prison thing. Once they can make money off of it, they're not going to stop it. It's not going to stop until more awareness comes. It's like with the prison industry complex. All this stuff is feeding to that one little beast. And I like to get Sister Jackie take on that. I mean, I know you deal with kids as well. I mean, you deal with working with kids down in New Orleans, correct?
Yeah,
and I've been trying to find
my analysis is the same, is that we have to shift the perspective that our value is determined by how much money we have or how much money we can gain, right? And that our attitude, our personality, the way we love each other becomes more valuable than how much money we make, and it's a huge shift. And I don't have the expectation that it's going to happen in my lifetime, but if I can do it by example, my hope is that my kids, the kids of my neighborhood, will also recognize that their value is not determined by how much money they make, and they'll be less enticed, right, to do things or to participate in systems like foster care, like prisons for profit, like, exploiting the environment, or the plethora of other things that are profit-driven. Yeah.
Yeah, because
and that's all I'll say, once again, Sister, go ahead, Sister, go ahead.
I have been reaching out trying to get a federal lawyer to file a federal lawsuit because I just cannot find a federal lawyer to take on my case. I've never seen anything like this, that if somebody had told me this, I would have never believed that a grandmother who don't have no criminal history, no criminal record, could not get her grandchildren and was financially able to take care of her grandchildren, told them that I would sign a waiver and they state wouldn't have to give me a dime. But they ready to keep my grandchildren in foster care in the state of Minnesota in order to make money. And I just never seen anything like this. And I want to bring awareness. I want to make a change because, to me, I know that there is a federal law on the books that they supposed to contact me. They didn't even contact me. And another thing I'm really disappointed about, they took my granddaughter and changed her name. And when her mother, before she was even adopted or in, the minute she left the hospital, the foster mom gave her another name and was allowed her to be called by that name. And her mother had named her. And they changed her name to Hannah. And when I went to visit, I called her by Dorothy because that was her birth name her mother had on the birth certificate. They told me she did not know that name. And it's just sad that I can get nobody to help me make a difference. Mm-hmm. I want to make a law change. I want to go to President Obama and try to get him before he leaves office. I'm not saying, I want people to understand me real good. I'm not saying Caucasian people can't adopt. I'm not, for any race can't adopt. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying when you have family members who are willing to take them and don't have no criminal history, and you continue to let them stay in foster care and pay someone else, to me, that's a travesty. That is
Sister Jordan, how old is your granddaughter right now, the one they call Hannah?
My granddaughter, she's 3, and the other one is 4. And this is the sad part about it. My first granddaughter, she was 2 months old when I discovered she was in foster care. My son, he was on drugs. He had no idea the baby was in foster care. The mother was on drugs, too. She led my son to believe that her sister had the baby, and they went back to doing drugs. But there's a federal law that said they must contact family members. They did not contact me. And this is a huge problem. The reason they don't contact you, because they have a new law, that if a child be in foster care in more than 6 months, they have just the more right over your own natural family members than you do. And that's why
I got your. Well, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I'm gonna cut it short for this moment. I got your contact information. I thank you for reaching out to me in the Facebook as well too. But I definitely want to talk to you some more about this case. And I just want to get back to Sister Jackie. Thank you for calling in and offering that input. But Sister Jackie, you're actually dealing with kids, and where you at, right? That basically, I mean, you like the only parent that they know. It sounds like from what I read. Like you actually take care of these kids.
That's not exactly true. You know, I definitely am committed to a bunch of children that I didn't make from my neighborhood, and they definitely have other alternative views and experiences with their parents. Consistently, there is one parent incarcerated in each family that I work with, and I really am not trying to tell them that my way is the right way or to assume the role of exclusive parent. What I want to do is show them that there's really a number of different ways to live their life and that they have agency and can choose. Yeah, so I just think of myself as an alternative. You know, I'm co-parenting in the 7th Ward of New Orleans, where there's predominantly single mommies, and the fathers are incarcerated. 1 out of every 4 black men in the city are under some form of correctional control. It's the highest in the country. But Brother Ron, I'm not sure if Hillary told you, but I had a limited window to speak today. I just had this hour, and now I actually have to go to class. I would love to open this up for conversation another time, but I've been waiting outside the door, so I have to go.
No, sorry, no problem. I'm glad that you get a chance to call. I want to thank you for your service and work. And where can people hear more about, find out more information about what you're doing and Herman House? How can we keep up?
Yeah, they can just go to the website, hermanshouse.org. It's great. It's a great resource. You can link to other resources that talk about ending the prolonged use of solitary confinement, including Solitary Watch, the ACLU Boxed In, NARCAT. December 10th, we have NARCAT is hosting a Human Rights Day, focusing on the ending of long-term solitary confinement. Their website has a lot of resources. So, yeah, just get curious.
Thank you, sister, what you're doing with your time. And your time is very valuable. I'm glad you're giving the time for all the right reasons and for sharing the gift of you with us. And I want to let you know that we're going to award you the 2013 A.L.L.B.E Artist of the Year Award. I mean, because the stuff you're doing is truly beyond category, and you're a very incredible person. Very inspiring.
Thank you so much. I never do any of it alone, so I appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, thank you. We're blessed to have you around. So we'll talk again, and I want to thank you for doing all you're doing and have a great year, rest of the year.
Yes, you too. Power to the people.
Power to the people.